When the HOA burned my boat for refusing to pay their fees, they thought they'd break me. But what they didn't know was that I owned the land they were controlling, and that was just the beginning of their worst nightmare. Welcome, everyone. Before we dive into this epic story, I want to know, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below, and let's see how far this story travels. Now, grab some popcorn, because this one's going to get intense. I never expected to find myself at war with the Homeowners Association HOA, but here I was, standing at the edge of a battle that would change my life. When I first moved into my lakeside home, it felt like the perfect escape, quiet, peaceful, and surrounded by nature. My home was everything I had dreamed of. The house was modest, but it was mine, a symbol of years of hard work and sacrifice. I didn't know much about the Homeowners Association when I moved in, other than the fact that it existed. At first, they didn't bother me. I figured they were just a group of neighbors working together to keep the community nice. But soon, I learned that the HOA wasn't just about maintaining the neighborhood, it was about control. The first letter arrived after I'd been living in the house for about 6 months. It was thick, official looking, and filled with demands. Apparently, my boat anchored on my property by the lake was in violation of some HOA regulation. I didn't pay much attention to it at first. After all, the boat was parked well within the boundaries of my land, and I'd seen other people with similar items around the neighborhood. But the letter was clear. I had to pay hefty fines or risk being penalized further. I shrugged it off. Who were these people to tell me what I could and couldn't do with my property? This was my home, not some corporate-run housing complex. I refused to pay the fee and ignored their next few letters. I figured they would get the hint, but they didn't. Instead, the letters became more frequent and more threatening. They accused me of disregarding community guidelines, warned me about potential legal action, and even mentioned taking my boat away if I didn't comply. Each letter felt more like a personal attack. My patience began to wear thin, but I still refused to back down. After all, I wasn't the first person to have issues with the HOA, and I certainly wouldn't be the last. Then came the phone call. It was from the HOA, and the voice on the other end was cold, calculating. "You're in violation of our rules," they told me. "We're sending contractors over tomorrow to remove your boat. If you don't pay, we'll take further action." My blood boiled. Who did they think they were? I wasn't some pushover they could push around. I told them they had no right to touch anything on my property, especially not something as personal as my boat. The phone call ended with them warning me that I would face serious consequences. I was prepared to fight, but I didn't expect what happened next. I woke up one morning to a quiet, empty house. As I sipped my coffee, I heard the faint sound of sirens in the distance, but I wasn't concerned until I stepped outside and saw it. My boat, my prized possession, was engulfed in flames. The fire was already raging, and there was nothing I could do to save it. I rushed toward it, my heart pounding in my chest, but the heat was unbearable. The firefighters arrived too late. The boat was completely destroyed. It was clear now this wasn't some random accident. The HOA had set it on fire, a cruel and vengeful act to punish me for refusing to pay their fees. I stood there in shock, watching the remains of my boat burn to ash. It wasn't just a boat, it was a piece of my life, my hard work, and my escape from the world. And now it was gone, destroyed in an act of malicious spite. But this wasn't the end of it. This was just the beginning. Anger welled up inside me like a storm, but I wasn't going to let them get away with this. I called my lawyer and began gathering evidence. I knew the HOA had crossed a line, and I was determined to make them pay for what they had done. But the more I dug, the more I uncovered. And what I found wasn't just about my boat. As I sifted through property records, I realized something shocking. Over the years, I had acquired more land than I realized, not just the house and the lakeside property, but much more. The truth hit me hard. I actually owned a significant portion of the entire county. Through a series of real estate investments and purchases, I had become the silent owner of a vast expanse of land, including much of the land the HOA governed. I sat there in disbelief, staring at the records. The HOA hadn't just been overstepping their bounds, they had been trying to control land that belonged to me. This wasn't just a battle about fees or boat. This was about power. The power to dictate how people lived and what they did with their property. But they hadn't known who they were dealing with. Now, I had something far more powerful than just a legal case. I had control. I had the authority to challenge them in ways they couldn't even imagine. With my newfound knowledge, I was ready to take on the HOA. I called for a meeting, demanding to speak with the board. The tension in the room was palpable when I walked in. The board members, who had once seemed so untouchable, now looked nervous. They had no idea that the person they were dealing with wasn't some ordinary homeowner. They were facing the very landowner they had been trying to control. I laid out everything I had discovered. I told them about my ownership of the land, about how their actions had violated not only my property rights, but also the law. I didn't yell or threaten. Instead, I presented the facts calmly and firmly. The room was silent as they absorbed the weight of what I was saying. One by one, the board members' faces turned pale. They had no idea what they were up against. The more I spoke, the more they realized the truth. They had underestimated me. The fear in their eyes was unmistakable. They had burned my boat, thinking they could intimidate me into submission, but instead, they had ignited a fire within me that wouldn't be easily extinguished. As the realization sank in, the board members sat frozen, unable to respond. They had no legal ground to stand on. Their power, which they had so often abused, was now crumbling in front of them. The aftermath was swift and dramatic. With the media picking up the story, the HOA's illegal actions were exposed for all to see. I wasn't the only one who had suffered at their hands. Neighbors who had been too afraid to speak out now found their voices. Together, we filed a class action lawsuit against the HOA for their harassment, fraud, and destruction of property. The board was forced to step down. The HOA's reign of terror came to a grinding halt. And as for me, I didn't just win back my boat, I gained something far more valuable, my freedom and the respect of my community. The HOA was dissolved, their policies deemed unlawful, and their members left in disgrace. The damage to my boat couldn't be undone, but that was the least of my worries now. I had taken a stand, and in doing so, I had reclaimed not just my property, but my dignity. As I looked out over the lake from my front porch, I reflected on how this all began: a simple refusal to pay an unjust fee. That one decision had led to the unmasking of a corrupt system and had given me the power to change my future. I realized, in that moment, that the true victory wasn't just in the lawsuit or the defeat of the HOA, it was in knowing that I had taken control of my own life and had fought for what was right. And as for the HOA, they would never make the mistake of underestimating anyone again.